Now, here are Morgan Streetman and Roxanne Wilder.
Young for us there.
Yeah, well, it was
Four
buddies
dead in
Crosby,
Ohio.
Stills, and Nash.
Oh, was that back then? Okay,
Oh,
Crosby,
yeah.
Stills,
Yeah,
Nash,
50
and
years
Young.
ago. 50 years ago.
And Young. Wow, somebody's calling for you, Pat George, in there. Speaking of which, if you want to get on the horn with us today at the Morgan Streetman Show, the number to call is 888-404-1010. But we got Roxanne Wilder here today.
Hello, Morgan. Love to be here. And today's a big day because we're starting to open back up our state phase 1.
That's right.
Baby steps. Here we go. 25%. Remember that rule of thumb if you're in a restaurant or a retail store?
Man, what a joke that is. 25% capacity. I mean, how do you operate as a business? I mean, you got fixed costs, right? The air conditioning they don't mark that down by 75%. They don't mark your light bill, your utilities. You got all your fixed costs to open up your restaurant. But now you can only have 25% of your total normal patronage to actually run your restaurant.
Sure, you're right. Sure, that's going to happen.
That's not going to work.
I think restaurants will be tough, but hopefully with the retail stores, I mean, when you're in there during the day, most times it's not like it's packed.
Yeah, so you think they'll be able to make it. Well, and is it 25% of your, I guess it's 25% of what the fire code says, right? I mean, that's
exactly
the rule, right? That's the most reasonable interpretation of the rule, I would say. It's interesting. I heard the governor say that he expects us to keep our masks on when we get to the restaurant until we're actually eating. I'm like, you got to wear a mask into a restaurant and then keep it on? I don't know. I don't like it. I don't like it one bit, but I am glad we're reopening. Another good thing that's reopening today is the state parks. And in fact, as I drove in this morning, I saw them reopening the sort of redneck Riviera beach that we've got there along Gandy Boulevard. I don't know if it's redneck Riviera, but it's some kind of Riviera.
Oh, and Clearwater Beach is open. I had the video of that playing earlier. They have a camera from Pier 60.
Yeah.
And Clearwater Police, it looks like Daytona Beach. They're driving up and down that beach in those vehicles.
Nice. Well, at least it's open.
My daughter is bird watching today at one of those parks.
Oh,
yes.
Wonderful. Well, it's nice to get back outside, everybody. I encourage you to use that. We'll have some more Florida news for you a little bit later in the program when we talk some about the unemployment system here in the state of Florida, which is a total disaster. But we'll get into that hopefully toward the end there of the program. We've got an interesting little out there segment for you that involves the unemployment system. But we wanted to, before we jump into some of our stories today, we've got some on Joe Biden. We've got a little bit on coronavirus. So, Pat George, you familiar with the term gain of function?
No.
Okay, we're going to learn about gain of function today. Gain of function research is going to be a big part of our program today. We're going to learn all about that. But before we jump into that, we thought we would take a quick look back at the Kim Jong-un story. And I don't know if you saw this, but some proof of life came out over the weekend.
How do we know that's real?
Well, we don't know it's real. Admittedly, we don't know it's real. But
Could have been years ago.
It could have been years ago, but I will have to say that he looks like, if you look at some of the photographs that have come out, you can actually see there's a mark on his wrist, and it looks an awful lot like there was an IV in his wrist. So
I thought you were going to say it was a timestamp.
Well, so also he's pretty bloated, so it looks like he may have had a procedure. But I've seen videos where he's actually smoking, which causes me to think that he didn't just have a heart procedure in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So maybe that's wrong, but typically you don't get right back to smoking after a heart procedure. So, all of this raises the question of why and how does our mainstream media always get it so wrong on North Korea?
Did you hear Trump say that wasn't true?
Yeah, well, we should have trusted the president when he said that he didn't think that was accurate. So, but, obviously something went on, I think, based on the videos and the photographs showing something on his wrist. And again, if you look at him, he looks very bloated, even more than normal bloated. So maybe one day we'll learn the true story. Probably not in this environment, though. When you really look at it, how much truth do we ever get about North Korea? We don't ever seem to be able to exactly figure out what's going on there. Another story we don't seem to be able to figure out exactly what's going on, and nobody seems to be covering it, well, at least not covering it the way they did with Brett Kavanaugh, is the allegations against Joe Biden. The sexual assault allegations by Tara Reade. Now, Joe Biden was on Morning Joe last week, and I want to hurry up and get to it so we don't run out of time during this segment. But I got a clip from that. You got to listen to his delivery, and then I've got some more stuff to tell you about it, but this is important. I wanted you to hear it from his mouth and how he responds to the questions from Mika Brzezinski on Morning Joe. This was just last Friday.
Are you absolutely certain? Are you absolutely positive there is no record of any complaint by Tara Reade against you?
I am absolutely positive that no one that I'm aware of ever has been made aware of any complaint, a formal complaint made by or a complaint by Tara Reade against me at the time this allegedly happened 27 years ago or until I announced for I guess it was in April or May of this year. I know of no one who's aware that any complaint was made.
I've got two more questions. The first...
Okay, please.
Go ahead. The first is about your University of Delaware records. Do you agree with the reporting that those records were supposed to be revealed to the public and then they were resealed for a longer period of time until after you leave, quote, public life? And if you agree with that, if that's what happened, why did that happen?
Because, look, the fact is that there's a lot of things of speeches I've made, positions I've taken, interviews that I did overseas with people, all of those things relating to my job. And the idea that they would all be made public in the fact while I was running for public office, they could be really taken out of context. The papers are position papers. They are documents that existed and that when for example, when I met with Putin or when I met with whomever, and all of that to be fodder in a campaign at this time, I don't know of anybody who's done anything like that. And so the National Archives is the only place there would be anything having to do with personnel records. There are no personnel records in the Biden papers at the university.
So personnel records aside, are you certain there was nothing about Tara Reade in those records? And if so,
I am absolutely certain.
Why not approve a search of her name in those records?
Approve a search of her name?
Yes, and reveal anything that might be related to Tara Reade in the University of Delaware records.
There is nothing. They wouldn't. They're not there. And if it's, I don't understand the point you're trying to make.
The point I'm trying to make is that
personnel records by definition.
The point I'm trying to make is that you are approving and actually calling for a search of the National Archives records of anything pertaining to Tara Reade. I'm asking why not do the same in the University of Delaware records, which have raised questions because they were supposed to be revealed to the public and then they were sealed for a longer period of time. Why not do it for both sets of records?
Because the material in the University of Delaware has no personnel files, but it does have a lot of confidential conversations that I had with the president about a particular issue, that I had with the heads of state of other places, that would not be something that would be revealed while I was in public office or while I was seeking public office. It just stands to reason, to the best of my knowledge, no one else has done that either.
I'm just talking about her name, not anybody else in those records. A search for that. Nothing classified with the president or anybody else. I'm just asking why not do a search for Tara Reade's name in the University of Delaware records?
Look, I mean, who does that search?
The University of Delaware. Perhaps you set up a commission that can do it. I don't know. Whatever is the fairest way to create the most transparency.
Well, look, Mika, she said she filed a report. She has her employment records still. She said she refiled a report with the only office that would have a report in the United States Senate at the time. If the report was ever filed, it was filed there, period.
Look, the idea that my work in public office could be made public while I'm running for public office, I don't know anybody who's done that.
We're back on the Morgan Streetman Show, and Morgan is going to translate what we just heard.
I mean, can you
we
believe
heard the
that?
interview with Joe Biden
Oh.
and Mika.
It was painful,
Yes.
wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, first he tried, Joe's always, look! Joe's always telling you to look. Look. That's how he always, look. You listen for that with Joe Biden. It's like Dr. Burke says so. Just like Elizabeth Warren used to start every answer with so, and Dr. Burks does it as well. Now
So,
we can
confession, I do that too.
So stop it, okay? Look, stop it.
It's time to buy. It buys you time. So it
Knock
sounds
it
better
off.
than So anyways, continue.
All right. So one of the things, kidding. One of the things that is so interesting is that it has been reported that Biden's operatives actually accessed within the past year those records at the University of Delaware. He may have known something was coming, and he may have already sent his operatives in there to look for something. Now, it's interesting to hear Mika ask him, why can't you just do a search on her name? He didn't have an answer for that, if you notice. Well, who does the search? I don't know, maybe the university, maybe a commission you put together. I mean, you pick. You pick, Joe Biden. But he can't really answer the question. As all he could do is repeat his talking points that that's not where the personnel records would be. Now, you just compare the way the media has treated Joe Biden, totally hands off. I mean, even though that was a somewhat tough interview, it wasn't that tough. She didn't really drill down on him on some of the details and really hammer him. And we can just compare that with the way Brett Kavanaugh was treated back during his confirmation.
Agreed. Her tone was more severe than the actual questions.
Exactly. And she did let him kind of dangle in the wind there a little bit with these long periods of silence, but that's his own fault. He wasn't prepared to answer tough questions. She may have gotten a little bit off script. And by the way, we're understanding that some of these interview shows with Joe Biden are actually fully scripted. And you can hear the difference between the way he sounds there and the way he sounds, for instance, when he's talking to Al Sharpton, where he's just rattling stuff off. It almost sounds like he's reading. But what I really wanted to get to, there's a couple things I wanted to. First of all, what do you think it is that he said to Putin that he doesn't want known? If you remember, Joe Biden talks about meeting alone with Vladimir Putin. And I remember from the Russia investigation of the last several years of President Trump that no person can ever meet alone with Vladimir Putin and not fall under his sway. He's like Dracula with those eyes. I mean, he just mesmerizes you, and you have to do exactly what he says. I mean, that's the mythology that they give us on Vladimir Putin.
I think he put something in the vodka.
Maybe he puts a little something in the vodka.
This sounds almost similar to Bill Clinton, because if you ever hear anybody who's met Bill Clinton in person talk about him, they're hypnotized too, but in a different sort of way.
Right. So
Putin
what happens?
has his vibe. Clinton has his vibe.
Right. What happens if we put Putin and Clinton in the same room together? I mean, it's like matter and antimatter, and it explodes. I don't know. But Biden obviously doesn't want anybody to find out what went on in his meetings with Vladimir Putin. But more importantly, the point I kind of wanted to get to is if you look at what some of the media is saying, and this is out there on Twitter and other places, you can go out and find this, and the media is saying, their actual representatives, reporters, or put quotes around reporters, but the people who write stories, columnists, etc., are saying we are treating Joe Biden the exact same way we treated Brett Kavanaugh. Now, if you believe that, you've got a very short memory. If you believe that, I mean, they are totally gaslighting you. What is gaslighting? They're telling you something is the truth, which you should know to be a lie, but they keep repeating it, and they want you to believe it or think maybe you're crazy. Maybe you're misremembering the way they treated Kavanaugh, because the truth is that the media would never lie to you, would they? They lie to you all the time, and this is just one more instance. And I hope you see the hypocrisy here. I hope you see the comparison. It's so close in time. You've got to see it. You've got to see the difference between the way that they went absolutely bonkers over the Brett Kavanaugh allegations, about which there was much less actual evidence. In fact, only Christine Blasey Ford's 16-year-old girl voice testimony, that was the only evidence supporting her position. Right? At Tara Reade, we've got significant factual evidence. There was some kind of report made. In addition, her mom called Larry King. We played that clip for you last week.
Just saying that you were doing a great job of describing gaslighting, and a fun little psychological fact about gaslighting. It's like the number one tactic sociopaths use to control people.
Well, I tell you what, the media people are a bunch of sociopaths. That much is obvious. They don't care anything about the truth or trying to be consistent. I mean, they just simply can't. And then to sit here and tell us that they're treating Joe Biden when they wrote like 700, and this is stories written, for example, just by CNN, almost 700 stories in 19 days CNN wrote about the allegations against Brett Kavanaugh. Now, that's just stories written. Remember, CNN's primarily a television channel, a cable news network, in fact. And how many on-air segments did they do on the Kavanaugh stuff? I mean, you're talking about probably hundreds. Now, how many did they do about the Joe Biden allegations in the first 19 days? We had this quiz last week. You'll probably remember the answer. Pat George?
I would.
0.
I would say, yeah, 0.
Sorry, I gave you the answer.
No, but did you see or hear the Pelosi interview about Biden?
I've seen a couple of them. Tell me which one you're talking about.
I'm talking about when they compared it with Kavanaugh. Kind of the same questions, and
What
then
did she
they
say?
gave her answer about Biden, and then played her old answer about Kavanaugh.
Oh, good.
Ooh.
Oh, it's hilarious. It's so different.
Yeah. Well, it'd be hilarious, but I'm sure if you're sitting in Brett Kavanaugh's seat, it wasn't very funny.
It wasn't at the time, but no, she's really. You can tell she's really give him a chance. You know, the facts aren't in, but when it was Kavanaugh, it was all you've got to believe her. She was right.
Well, they set the rules until the rules don't suit them, and then they change the rules, and the media goes right along with it. They are part and parcel of this propaganda. That's what it is. It's propaganda, and the media goes right along with it, and they just want to tell the story to get you to think about things in a certain way. That's their whole goal. And don't you feel like they're manipulating you? I know I do. And I don't like it. I would like some more intellectual honesty and some more consistency out of my media. Speaking of which, we've got the coronavirus story, the Wuhan coronavirus, which has not been reported on accurately in so many ways. And I wanted to go over some of those with you today because I don't know if you saw, but there was a revised death count that came out from the CDC on Friday evening. Nice time to release it. And they released the death count. Now, this death count is based on death certificate data. And you know what? They have the death count from February 1st of 2020 to April 25th of this year. Their total death count is 37,308.
I didn't hear this.
Wow.
This is all news to me.
Yeah. And look, there's already some fact-checking websites out there that are trying to tell you not to understand this the way you should understand it. But listen to what I'm telling you. That is based on the death certificate data, 37,308. And they're saying, well, it only counts through April 25th. And, you know, there's been a bunch since then, which there really hasn't. But, you know, if you believe that, and it doesn't count before February 1st, well, there weren't any before February 1st that were reported.
This is the CDC?
The CDC. And they've got two websites. I checked it out. They got two separate websites. One of them gives the death certificate count at 37,308. Another one gives the number that the media is still reporting, which the last time I looked at it last night was 68,276 deaths. But if you notice, there's an asterisk on that death count. And it says specifically the CDC does not know the exact number of COVID-19 illnesses, hospitalizations, and deaths for a variety of reasons. And then they go on to give you the reasons. But think about that. They're telling you they don't know the exact number, but they're giving you the number 68,276. Not 275, 276. I mean, they're trying to give you a number that's designed to make you think they know the exact number if you don't read the asterisk below it. But the truth of the matter is they don't know the exact number of deaths. And when you count the number of death certificates that actually list it as the cause of death, now you're down to only about 37,000 and change. Think about that. That's almost double. The number they're giving you is almost double the actual number. And they're telling you that, and that's being reported far and wide like it's fact. You won't hear them reporting the 37,000 number, the actual number of death certificates. You won't hear that. Now, let's even compare those numbers. Some, you know, and those are not small numbers. That's still a lot of people who have died. Okay, and everybody says one life is too many, one life is too many. Well, yeah, maybe one life is too many, but what are we doing about car accidents? Why don't we get rid of cars? If one life is too many, we got to stop allowing people to buy butter or bacon or smoke or other things because one life is too many. In fact, we've got to abolish, let's buy fiat, let's have the Congress just abolish death because one life is too many. I'm trying to be a little bit facetious here, and I hope you're understanding what I'm getting at when I do that. My point is that in so many areas of life, we don't enforce the rule that one life is too many. And we can't do it here either. We've got to balance things. We've got to always have a balance. Now, I wanted to get into you. The music's running, so we really don't have time to get into it this segment. Maybe when we come back, let's compare these actual death rates with the projections that we were all given. And by the way, this isn't a long time ago that we were given these projections. We're only talking about like a month or two ago, we were given projections of millions of deaths and then hundreds of thousands of deaths. I mean, how could they be so wrong? How could they be so wrong?
Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. And Morgan, I was just chit-chatting with you, and I didn't even think to say, where are we going next?
Well, we're staying on this coronavirus story, the Wuhan coronavirus, and I got pages more notes to go on this, so I really want to get to it. Now, I was going to just compare the death rates in the U.S. to the death rates in Sweden. One of the things I want to point out to you, because Sweden didn't close down, but they've only had about 2,679 total deaths, according to their count, as compared to our 37,000, if you believe the death certificates, or if you believe the inflated numbers, and death certificates may even be inflated, 68,000.
But that's another one. If I just was doing a drive-by reading of headlines and the way it was presented, Sweden's in horrible shape when you compare them to Finland, and I forget the other, Norway, I believe. But aren't those further north and probably less populated?
Well, and yes, but I'd also point out one of the issues that we have, you remember Sweden stopped testing months ago. They stopped testing months ago, so we don't even have an accurate number of their total number of cases. So if you take their case count and look at their death count, then they've got a 12% death rate. But it's actually much lower than that because they're not testing to see total number of cases. And, of course, the failure there, because we've got over 1.18 million cases in the U.S. and 68,000, again, if you believe the inflated numbers, 68,000 deaths, that's a 5.8% death rate. But those numbers are also inflated. Why? Because the total number of cases is only confirmed tested cases, and we know there are many multiples of that of people who've never been tested, just like during the flu season. But let's keep moving because there's a lot of interesting news here, and I definitely want to get to gain of function information, which we got to move quick to get to. I don't know if you saw, but a 15-page government report was leaked last week to the Australia's Daily Telegraph newspaper. It was a government report written by the Five Eyes countries. That's the U.S., the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And it covers a number of interesting facts. Big picture, it concludes that the coronavirus came out of that Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is what we've been saying for months now, just using our common sense. We didn't even have to do any research. We just applied some common sense to the situation. But let me run through the key bullet points coming out of this 15-page government report. Bullet point 1, China lied and covered up the Wuhan coronavirus outbreak, and that endangered other countries. Think about the language of that being in a government report. So China lied and covered up, endangering other countries. Like, for example, who is patient zero? You know they know. That's the first thing that you figure out during a pandemic or an epidemic is who is patient zero, and we don't know that to this day. We have our suspicions, but China's never told anybody. Point 2, China's silence and disappeared doctors. I mean, think about that being in a government report, and they've got the examples, and we've talked about some of them, but there were, well over 10 doctors who just up and disappeared in the Wuhan area. China destroyed evidence. Virus samples. Remember, they've destroyed all the virus samples from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, or at least that's what they claim. They also destroyed that Huanan seafood market. They've bulldozed it already. I mean, soon they'll be destroying that Wuhan Institute of Virology, so there's zero chance that we could ever investigate it. Here's another point. China refused to provide live virus samples to scientists working on a vaccine. So they, very early in January, gave out the sequenced genome of the virus, but they've refused to provide live samples. Obviously, they had them Why can't you provide them to other nations who are also trying to work on this? These are important questions. I mean, think about China as a partner in the global society that we keep talking about, or the media keeps talking about. We've got to move towards this global society where we all live and work together. How do you work with China? How do you work with China when they lie, they cover up, and they don't help? How do you work with somebody like that, a country like that? How about China and the WHO, the WHO, denied human-to-human transmission until mid-January of this year, when they knew in December, the latest in December, that there was human-to-human transmission. Now, the report ultimately concludes that COVID-19 originated in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, based on some of the work being done by the bat lady, Xi Jinping. We've told you about her before, and we're going to talk some more about her research during this segment. But I also want to point out, yesterday on ABC's This Week, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told Martha Raddatz that there is enormous significant evidence that this virus originated in the Wuhan laboratory. And I wanted to cover, if I can, with you just a few key dates. Let's see. November 9th of 2015, the Wuhan Institute of Virology publishes a study revealing that they've created a new virus in the lab from SARS-CoV. That's the original SARS coronavirus. Remember, this is SARS-CoV-2, but they've created a new one in 2015 from the original. December 6th of 2019, that's 5 days after a man who's linked to that seafood market presented with pneumonia-like symptoms. Well, his wife contracts it. Well, what does that suggest? So December 6th of last year, that suggests human-to-human transmission is active. Known about it since December 6th. December 27th, Chinese health authorities told that a novel disease then affecting about 180 patients that we know of was caused by a new coronavirus. December 26th through the 30th, there was evidence of the new virus emerging in Wuhan from the patient data. December 31st, the Chinese internet authorities began censoring terms from social media, such as Wuhan unknown pneumonia. January 1st of this year, 8 Wuhan doctors also warned about the new virus. Well, they were detained on January 1st and condemned by Chinese Communist Party authorities. January 3rd, China's top health authority issues a gag order. January 5th, the Wuhan Municipal Health Commission stops releasing daily updates on new cases. January 12th, a professor in Shanghai has his lab closed by authorities for certification 1 day after it shares the genomic sequence data with the world for the first time. January 14th, the Chinese National Health Commission chief privately warns his colleagues that the virus is likely to develop into a major public health event. So they knew about this early. They don't tell other countries. They don't share the information. They don't share the samples. They don't share the data. January 24th, officials in Beijing prevent the Wuhan Institute of Virology from sharing sample isolates with the University of Texas. February 6th, China's internet watchdog tightens controls on social media platforms and starts to lock down any mention of any kind of Wuhan virus. And then it goes on and on. People start disappearing. Of course, they've been disappearing all along. And there's more dates, but those are some of the key dates that we wanted to cover. Now, this is what I really want to get to, and that's why we're going to keep moving as fast as we can. You know, everybody knows Dr. Fauci, or they think they know Dr. Fauci. And remember, we've brought you some information on Dr. Fauci before. Now, remember, this guy's been the head of the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases since 1984. That's almost 40 years. That's back since when Ronald Reagan was president of this country, he was named. So this guy is a lifelong government bureaucrat. And you think he's learned how to operate yet? We've shared with you before how much he loves Hillary Clinton. Now, that in and of itself doesn't make him a bad person, but those fawning emails that he sent to Susan Rice and others about Hillary Clinton, or Cheryl Mills about Hillary Clinton, to me indicate somewhat questionable judgment for this guy. You know, it's almost as questionable as Harvard's judgment in giving Jeffrey Epstein a key card to access their building where he had private offices in their school building. Okay, and Harvard's involved in this as well. He accessed those offices dozens of times between 2010 and 2018 after he'd already been in jail for one of his crimes, although he apparently committed many, many more. But here's what I want to get to. The National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, you know they gave $3.7 million to that Wuhan Institute of Virology for collecting and studying bat coronaviruses? That's called a surveillance study, but they actually they gave the money to collect and study bat coronaviruses between the years 2014 and 2019. Now, if you remember back in 2018, the U.S. Embassy sent warnings about the safety at that exact lab. Now, think about this timing-wise, too, with respect to who was president and what was going on and when these decisions were made, because there was a point at which gain-of-function research was not allowed, okay? But then it was allowed again. So let's think about that timing, because gain-of-function research was actually paused based on the U.S. government in October of 2014. The White House announced that there would be a deliberative process to look at whether or not we ought to be funding gain-of-function research. Gain-of-function research is an attempt to take a virus and make it more deadly, stronger, and more transmissible, and it's specific to what's called PPPs, or potential pandemic pathogens. So, quote-unquote, for study purposes, we're going to take something that could become a pandemic, and we're going to try to make it more deadly, more transmissible, and stronger so we can study it. And why are we going to do that? I have down on my notes here, hubris, excessive pride, hubris. We think we can handle it. We're better, we're smarter, we're safer. We'll do it right this time. This time we'll keep it from getting out. Well, we know that doesn't always work out. Unintended consequences, and pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Now, in 2019, you'll be surprised to know that the federal government committed another $3.7 million. So now we're over $7 million to this Wuhan Institute of Virology in 2019. Now, this is our tax money. And guess what it's for? For 6 years of work on coronaviruses, including gain-of-function studies. Gain-of-function, which was illegal from October 14. And guess when they changed that rule? Guess what month and what year?
I would say December of 19.
No. January of 2017. What else happened in January of 2017? We had a little handover of government power, right?
There you go. You're right.
So the Obama administration, who made gain-of-function research illegal for U.S. funds, all of a sudden, on the way out the door, they go ahead and release policy guidance that, yeah, we can handle this. You can get back to doing gain-of-function research. And like I said, then we see the embassy reporting in 2018, there's a problem with this Wuhan Institute of Virology. I mean, is this a setup? I don't know. Some people are saying that, but I can tell you what I know it is. It's excessive pride. It's the idea that we can handle this when in reality, we don't even have any idea what we're doing. Now, let's listen real quickly to a clip from Dr. Fauci, and I'm going to have to come back to this after the break. This is from January 2017. Listen here.
There is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak.
January 2017. Oh, the great Dr. Fauci. We all trust him with our lives. And there he is telling us in January of 2017, we're going to have a surprise outbreak. Don't doubt it. You can count on it. There is no question we're going to have a surprise outbreak.
And we're back on the Morgan Streetman Show and just heard a statement from Dr. Fauci as we went to break that was pretty alarming and prophetic. And you have to ask yourself, how can this person who's predicted this pandemic also be in charge of fixing it?
Well, yeah, it's kind of like a closed system. He gets to create it by funding the research into this stuff, which, you know, oh, big surprise, somehow gets out of the lab over there, and now he gets to fix it. I wonder how many additional hundreds of millions of dollars his organization, the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, will receive to fight this pandemic, and his power as a 40-year government bureaucrat continues to grow. But let's recap just a little bit, because I don't want our friends at home to miss this. In October of 2014, the Obama administration said that we had to stop funding using our taxpayer dollars, which makes sense to me, by the way. We had to stop funding gain-of-function research where we actually try to make potential pandemic pathogens stronger, deadlier, more transmissible. Okay, so that's like, Russian roulette. Let's stop playing Russian roulette. Okay, I vote for that. That sounds good to me. And meanwhile, they fund $3.7 million to the Wuhan Institute of Virology to go out and collect a bunch of bat coronaviruses. And, oh, by the way, the Institute can be doing other things with these. Okay, it uses the U.S. money for collections, and then maybe they use Chinese money for their own gain-of-function research in the lab. We don't know. But our intelligence agencies are now saying that this virus came out of this lab. Okay, meanwhile, in January of 2017, on the way out the door, the Obama administration restarts funding of gain-of-function research. At the same time, Dr. Fauci is giving a speech called Pandemic Preparedness in the Next Administration. And he's giving this to the Georgetown Center for Global Health, Science and Security and the Harvard Global Health Institute. I told you I'd mention Harvard again. Well, there Harvard is. Okay, what great judgment Harvard showed in its strong associations with Jeffrey Epstein. And this was given at the Georgetown University Medical Center in Washington, D.C. And he says, and just so you didn't miss it here, let's listen to the last part of what he said. And this is very close to the introduction of his speech.
But also there will be a surprise outbreak.
Also, there will be a surprise outbreak. And before that, he said there's no question these things are going to happen. So there will be a surprise outbreak. How can it be a surprise if you already know it's going to happen more than 2 years in advance? And that's why I think we see some people on the internet saying this is not a pandemic, but this is a plandemic, right? Okay. Well, and we continue to see the after effects of this virus that escaped the Wuhan lab. We continue to see the effects, and let's talk about some of those. And this is our Out There segment.
Even though it's about very grounded things and things that are happening here in reality, it's out there that this is even happening.
I mean, this is one of the most out there segments, because who would have thought 2 months ago, who would have thought this could be possible? We've got over 30 million unemployment claims have been filed in this country. Those are just the ones that are reported, over 30 million. The estimates range from there's an additional 9 to 14 million people who have become unemployed in this time. So we've got 40 million plus people in this country. And that may even be a low estimate because it doesn't necessarily count gig workers and other part-time workers, other people who do a lot of different odd job type things. Just the reported unemployment claims are 30 million. The estimates are that there's an additional 9 to 14 million people, putting it over probably 40 million people. There are only like 162 million people that work in this country as of 2 months ago. Mm-hmm. So that's a full quarter, 25%. I mean, this is a tragedy. This is really sad. A lot of those people don't have a big savings account somewhere. They don't have a huge nest egg to fall back on. They're living paycheck to paycheck, and that's why we see these food banks oversubscribed. We see miles and miles of cars waiting to get into a food bank. People are going to really struggle to make it, and my question is, when is this going to come back? I mean, we've got restaurants, we're saying they have to operate at 25% capacity. Well, they're not going to need to rehire their entire workforce to operate at a 25% capacity. There's all these follow-on results. I mean, it's like dominoes falling. When you got 25% of our working population no longer working, well, do you think they're spending money on the same things that they used to spend money on? Okay, so now we've essentially got a quarter of our economy that's not functioning. Remember, this is a consumer-based economy. For this to work, we need people to be out spending their money. I mean, I'm not saying this. I'm not saying that's right, if you want to say right and wrong. I'm not saying that's right. What I'm saying, and this is the Keynesian theory. This is the velocity of money theory. We don't want people saving money. We don't want them maintaining anything. The flow needs to happen. The paycheck needs to come out, and the money from the paycheck needs to be spent right away on disposable things, hopefully, and just keep it flowing.
They're spending their money on live PD the other night. I saw him arrest a guy, and he said that he had that marijuana in his pocket. He had bought that from his stimulus check.
Oh, boy. Well, hopefully that was stimulating. That was a stimulating experience for him. But, another figure came out as we're talking about what's going to happen to the economy. I mean, this is a big deal. I mean, I really feel like the U.S. economy right now is kind of similar to a man, or it could be a woman, but a person, we'll say a person, who was swimming a couple of 100 yards offshore, and up swims a great white. And the great white, just like in the movie Jaws, bites him in half. And then the top part of the person tries to keep swimming for shore. Like we're still alive. We're in shock. We're aware, but we think you're not going to make it, right? You're not going to make it to shore. I'm concerned that's the situation that we're in. Look at the stock market. Relatively, it's still doing pretty well. But if you look at the chart and you compare it to what happened back in the late 20s, 1929, you'll see that it almost exactly matches the meteoric rise of the stock market. And then there's a big correction, and then there's a bounce back. And if you look at the two charts, we're in a little bit of a bounce back, the dead cat bounce. And then what follows the dead cat bounce is about 4 years of a significant downtrend that would mean that we would get the Dow back to something in the range of $10,000. So is that what's coming for America? The first quarter GDP is down 5%.
And I think when you have those people who are out of work and lost their job, it didn't happen until a couple of weeks ago. So they're still surviving on their last paycheck that they're getting. What about when they no longer get paychecks at all?
And the first quarter GDP, I mean, that covers January, February, and March. We haven't even gotten into what's going to happen with April and then May. And like you're saying, these people who now don't have any money to spend at all, what's our second quarter GDP going to be down? How are we going to do that? I mean, we were living, as a country, we're living close to the line. We're living paycheck to paycheck. We're so heavily leveraged with all this debt, and now we're taking on $6, $8, maybe $10 trillion more debt just in a couple of months here. We're just blowing it out. We're blowing our credit cards out. How much of a credit limit are we going to have? We're using it all. And then what happens? Then what do we do? A lot more we didn't get to. We'll see you next week, folks. I'm Morgan Streetman, and that's the way I see it. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.